A lot about immigration. Let's slide into the immigration portion of the afternoon, evening. What is the reason why most people who are immigrants come to live in America?
It varies. It varies quite a bit. I also want to say Bernie Sanders dropped the jobs issue and dropped the working class issue. Why? Because he's put through the meat grinder of one of the main political parties. And you are not going to get, it is the uniparty in Washington against the people. That was what Trump represented, and the proof of that was the interview that Bernie gave. I think it was to Salon, and he said something about, he was asked about, I remember the guy that I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, who said, well, of course you're for open borders. And Bernie Sanders said, no, that's a Koch brothers idea. They want the cheap labor. That was what his position used to be. But then, oh no, has to be for open borders because he's running as a Democrat. That is what hurts the working class, the low-wage workers more than anything else. We're just going to keep dumping more low-wage workers on the country. And that is in answer to your question. I mean, a lot of them are coming for the welfare benefits now. As Milton Friedman said, you can't have a welfare state and open borders. And we're getting a lot of that now. Pre-1970 immigrants made more money, bought more houses than the people who already lived here. Post-1970 immigrants, vastly poorer than the people who already live here. Well, that's just competing for resources, both for government benefits and for jobs from our own poor people. How about we bring in people to compete with talk show hosts and senators and governors and Wall Street bankers? Then we'll see, how much compassion we have for the rest of the world. But Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want somebody to compete with him for his job. He wants to bring in people to compete for his landscaper's job. That is how Donald Trump cares about the people who are being hurt and have been left behind and ignored by both political parties for decades now.
Well, first of all, I really take offense to the very simplistic left and right way that you're framing this. I mean, it suits your viewers and Fox News, but it doesn't suit reality. Second of all...
Well, first of all, wait, stop. It is reality. What you're just watching on the screen were not people who voted for Trump. There are people who believed that Trump, because they were screaming anti-Trump slogans. That's why. Look, I'm not impugning everyone who's against Trump. I'm merely saying that a subset of the American left is using violence in pursuit of their political aims, and nobody is saying anything about it. They're getting away with it, and people like you who should be denouncing it aren't. And that's the point I'm making.
Well, first of all, I did not participate in any of the protests. My protest yesterday was, as an undocumented immigrant in this country, one of 11 million who are viewed as criminals, my own way of protesting was just actually very quietly and respectfully thinking about what it means to be an immigrant in that Trump era, right? So that was my way.
Okay, well, thank you for not breaking anything. Well, I'm not accusing you of setting fires. I'm merely saying, like, where are people who agree with these folks standing up and saying, you're not allowed to do, you can't block traffic, you can't break things, you can't set fires. It's pretty simple.
Well, first of all, I cannot speak for all those people and why they did what they did. What I can tell you is that for many of us, this issue was not just quote-unquote political, it's personal. We're talking about millions of people who are related to undocumented people that you call criminal illegals every day, right? So it's not for me. I mean, I remember that Martin Luther King quote.
What should I call people who are here illegally? Should I pretend they're not here illegally?
No, hey, look, you asked me to come on your show pretty much once a week, and I come here as an undocumented person. I'm privileged.
You may be overstating it a little bit. I think this is the third time. But here's the point.
Here's the point. I am here illegally. I am here illegally talking to you as an undocumented, unauthorized person who doesn't have authorization. But I, as a person, am not illegal. But semantics aside,
okay,
right?
So I robbed a liquor store yesterday, which is illegal, but I'm not illegal. I don't even know what the point you're making is. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying your status is in violation of the law.
By the way, I did that. I came out voluntarily 6 years ago, just so we can actually tell the truth about this issue, right? Like, to tell the truth and have facts. And to me, I have to say, and kind of the way you're framing this whole conversation right now, it's consistent with thinking of the left or of immigrants as some sort of violent people, when the reality is immigrants in this country actually commit, undocumented immigrants specifically, commit less crime than native-born
Okay, actually what I was doing was rolling tape from yesterday, just to bring it back to reality, if I could. And pardon my interruption of your soliloquy.
No, that's okay.
This happened yesterday.
Yes.
People stood in the street, blocked traffic, committed acts of violence. in the name of a specific political point of view. I'm not saying all leftists are violent. I'm not saying all illegal aliens are violent. I'm saying the people on the screen were, and you don't see members of Congress, you don't see mayors of cities, you don't see governors who agree with their politics saying you can't do this. We're tolerating this stuff, and it's ripping the country in half. That's the point.
What is that Martin Luther King quote about riot being the voice of the unheard? Right? Like many of those people who are rioting, and again, I can't speak for all of them, but I know for a fact personally that many people who actually participated peacefully were just there to participate, to have a voice, to say that my parents are not criminals. Please stop terrorizing us. Please stop trying to
What you're doing
us.
is building a straw man. I in no way am criticizing people who have a legitimate disagreement and want to voice it. I do that on this show every night. I'm merely saying that when you block traffic, when you break things, when you commit acts of violence against other people, the rest of us as a society need to stop you from doing that or things fall apart. What you appear to be doing is justifying their behavior.
I'm not justifying anybody's behavior. All I'm telling you is, again, I can't speak for them. I can't speak for why people did what they did. But what I can tell you is that this is really a time of terror and just fear in a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And people want to be heard.
Yeah, I think
People
that's true. And you know who else wants to be heard but who doesn't
Yeah.
really get a regular hearing? Is American citizens who were born here, who see their country changing and becoming really chaotic, and they ought to have a voice in who comes here.
Tucker.
And your argument appears to be they have no right to say who comes here.
Wait a second. You just got the Bill O'Reilly slot representing those people. I mean, people like that.
Well, that would be
with
the
a voice.
majority of Americans who were born here, and I think they have a right to say who comes here. That's our
absolutely.
fundamental
But
disagreement.
It's not. We agree with that.
Really? Because you're here illegally, and you're basically saying, I dare you to do something about it.
No, I am here illegally, voluntarily coming out and saying, how do you define American? How do we fix this problem? How do we live with the fact that undocumented workers in this country, I actually brought you a little gift. It's from defineamerican.com. It's our fact sheet. It has 6 facts, and I know that you're, like these are independently sourced journalistic facts about undocumented people in this country and why they're here, right? The taxes they pay, Social Security. If you talk to the Social Security Administration here in Washington, D.C., actually the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration said that undocumented workers have contributed $100 billion into the Social Security fund.
I get it. I'm very familiar with these statistics. Some of them are true and some of them aren't. But here's the fact that I want to bring us back to, which is, don't American citizens have the right to determine who comes here and who doesn't? So you're an illegal alien, and you're lecturing me about your right to be here. I'm a little confused. A little bit. You're throwing this in my face and saying, you should like this.
Did I
you
throw
should
it in?
like this.
I did not, as a journalist, which I am, and I have a Pulitzer to show for it.
I'm very impressed, Jose.
Right, those are facts. They're independently verifiable facts, and I did not throw them at you.
Look,
all I'm doing is trying to provide. Look. If I did not want to have a conversation about this, as uncomfortable as this, I would have just kept in the closet and didn't tell anybody that I was here illegally.
Okay.
Right.
I'm grateful that you're here. I'm willing to believe I like immigrants, and I'm willing to believe that some of these are probably true statistics. But it doesn't change the fact that American citizens have the right to determine who comes here, and people who are here illegally have no right to demand that we keep them here. You don't agree with that. You say that illegal aliens somehow ought to have a political voice, and my position is that being illegal here puts you, by definition, outside the political process.
Millions of these quote-unquote illegal aliens, I'm not from Mars, are related to U.S. citizens.
Yes,
right?
that's true.
So those exactly. So are you going to tell those U.S. citizens then, they're right now U.S. citizen children in foster care because both parents have gotten deported?
Yes.
Right? So are you telling them that they cannot have
What
a
I
voice?
am saying is that the people who live here and control our government, which is the citizens of the United States, have a right to make the determination.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
do not.
I agree with that.
And here's my second question.
Yeah.
What is the level of immigration appropriate for this country? What is best for this country? We have 1.1 million coming illegally
here.
every year. We have some
Green
unknown number of immigrants here living illegally. We don't know the number.
Well, people say 11 million, right?
People say 20 million. But whatever. What's the right number?
That number you just quoted is from Numbers USA, which is labeled the hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Spare me the nonsense.
Nonsense.
Spare me the nonsense. I'm asking you a simple question.
The simple
you say you're a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist.
We need to figure out how many immigrants do we actually want in this country. Well, is it 1 million? For example, we issue about 1 million green cards a year.
I just said
is
that.
Is that enough?
So, no, that's my question to you since you do this for a living. I ask this question almost every night of people, and they haven't thought it through, or they're not willing to reveal what they really think. And I'm asking you now, what's the number, since you do it for a living, that we ought to be admitting into this country?
For me, before we figure that out, we have to ask harder questions of ourselves. But let me get back. Let me ask you a question.
You don't have an answer then?
Well, I have an answer. My mother right now is on a 12-year waiting list to get a green card to America. There are 1 million, as you said, 1 million green cards issued a year.
I'm aware.
Is that enough? There are, for example, companies in Silicon Valley that
You don't know
need
the
more
number.
green
You're
cards.
basically
Wait a second.
arguing against our immigration policy,
I am not
but you're
arguing.
not suggesting what it ought to be.
Look, I am here to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. As
You'd
we're
make
doing,
it
by the
more
way,
comfortable by
what-
answering a very simple question, but you're
Because,
not.
first of all, it's not a quote-unquote simple question.
Okay.
It's not a simple question, Tucker.
Okay. I'm going to give you some, we're unfortunately out of time. I'm going to give you some time to think about this, and I want you to come back on
by
with
the
an
way,
actual number.
And,
okay?
and for people watching, if you want to
Right.
go to the Define American Film Festival and
Right.
have more
Okay.
comfortable
Sell the
conversations,
product,
go
and
next
then we're
week.
going to go. But come
It's
back
not a
and,
product,
but I want
Tucker.
you to think about it, please, because it's a real question.
Well, I have more, but it doesn't
Okay.
fit kind of this.
I'll give you 8 minutes to tell me the number, and
that
we're
was
out of
great.
time now.
8 minutes? Great.
We'll say thank you.
What's your position on immigration reform, and do you believe, like some conservatives, that we need to slow the growth of total immigration?
I don't believe that we need to slow the growth of total immigration. As you know, somebody who my great-great-grandparents got here in the early 20th century, and then their extended family was all murdered in the Holocaust. But I'm a believer in immigration. What we have right now is, honestly, everybody should agree on immigration. It's the easiest issue in the world. Shut the border, figure out what to do with the people here. The only reason you even have to shut the border is because you have the welfare state. If there were no welfare state, then we could have free flow of people across the border. You could come in, you could work, you could leave, there'd be free commerce. You wouldn't be a net loss in terms of the tax dollar. You wouldn't be not paying taxes and then taking benefits. So you can have one of two things. You can either have a welfare state with very restrictive immigration, or you can have a non-welfare state with complete free flow of immigration. If we're going to have the welfare state, which realistically speaking we do, then what we have to do is we have to figure out how to shut the border now so that we're not incentivizing millions of more low education people to cross the low skill people who don't speak English to cross the border. And we actually start enforcing our visas because 40% of the folks who are here illegally have overstayed their visas that we gave them in the first place. And then we figure out what to do with the folks here. And in my view, whether that's a pathway to citizenship or whether that is a pathway to legalization, that doesn't become immediate until after the border is actually secure. Because until the border is secure, it's an open invitation to come in. Because how exactly are we going to tell? Is there a red stamp on your illegal immigration passport? There's no way to tell. If you come over today versus you came over 10 years ago, we can't tell that. There's no way to tell that. So the fact is that everyone sort of agreed on this going in, that it was going to be border security and then immigration reform. And then Barack Obama and Democrats in the Senate said that here's the new deal: border security, immigration reform, and no border security. And then they used that as a weapon to wield against Republicans. And again, this is an example of Republicans not understanding how the left operates. The left never wanted immigration reform. They wanted to run on immigration reform. The left wanted to be able to look in 2014 at all the Latinos and say to them, all the Hispanics, and say to them, look at these evil right-wingers. Look at these evil white-wingers. The reason they stopped immigration reform is because they hate you. Not because they have a rational, but because they hate you. Right? Obama could have done this during his first 2 years. He didn't. The reason he didn't is because he wants that issue as a club to divide people. And so we could come to an agreement on this. Everybody, left, right, center, basically agrees on the basic proposition that I'm stating right now, which is that you can't continue a free flow of immigration into a welfare system. But that's not politically advantageous. So my biggest problem is with both parties. I mean, the Republican Party, on the one hand, says the pro-immigration reform people who want to leave the border open say, on the one hand, we need more free labor for our businesses, which is a really kind of nasty way of churning through people, you know, who don't have high education. It's not about American freedom. It's about we need them to pay our Social Security. I mean, they've actually said this, right? We need young Latino immigrants to pay Social Security for all the old white people. That's nasty. And on the left, you have people who want to leave the border open because those are all potential Democratic voters if you can just get them into the welfare state.
He joins us tonight from Miami. Jorge, thanks for coming on.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So at an event several weeks ago in February, you said this, and I wanted to ask you about it, and I'm quoting you. I'm a proud Latino immigrant here in the United States. You know exactly what is going on here in the U.S. There are many people who do not want us to be here and who want to create a wall in order to separate us. But you know what? This is also our country. Let me repeat this. Our country, not theirs. It's our country. Who's the us and who's the they? Whose country is it?
This is our country. It is yours. It is mine. And it is ours. The interesting thing is that with the Trump administration and many people who support Donald Trump, they think it is their country, that it is a white country, and they are absolutely wrong. This is not a white country. This is not their country. It is ours, and that's precisely what I'm saying. Look, in 2044, in 2044, this country, the white population will become a minority. It will be a minority-majority country. That's precisely what I'm saying. Latinos, Asians, African Americans, or whites. It is our country, Tucker.
Right. Yeah. Well, let me just point out that you are white. Obviously, you're whiter than I am. You've got blue eyes. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what you mean by white or Latino, but let me just ask you again to explain our country, not theirs. Who is they? Whose country is it not?
Well, many people who want to go back to 1965 when there was a white majority. Many people who believe that Latinos and immigrants and refugees shouldn't be here. That's precisely what I was referring to.
So it's not their country?
Before the election,
belong to those people? What are you saying?
Well, it's also their country, but it's not only their country.
Right,
we have to understand that this is a multicultural, multiracial country, and we have to live and be tolerant. And that's exactly what I was referring to.
Well, I certainly agree with that.
Country.
Now, I don't want to bring this to race. You did, so I'm going to follow up on that. You have posited yourself as the leader of Latinos, and I'm not exactly sure what that word means. So Latinos seem to encompass, I don't know, German Guatemalans and Italian Argentines and Afro-Cubans and non-Spanish speaking Peruvians and, I don't know, blue-eyed rich Mexicans like you. What do those groups have in common exactly?
Well, what we have in common is that mostly that we come from a region in the world, Latin America, and there are many differences. Many people call them Latinos, many people call them Hispanics. We tend to speak more Spanish at home than others. We have not only hundreds but thousands of mass media in our own language, in contrast with what happened with Italians or Europeans before us. So in other words, it's a kind of immigration that has a distinct characteristics that others didn't have before.
But what is distinct, again, just to be totally clear, if I am a non-Spanish speaking Brazilian, I speak Portuguese, I'm a non-Spanish speaking Peruvian, I'm 100% German, but I live in Guatemala, and there are a lot of them there, as you know. There are also a lot of 100% Italian people in Argentina. There are a lot of African Latin American Cubans. What do they have in common? A lot of them don't like each other. They don't speak the same language. They have very different cultures. I don't understand why they're under one heading.
It's not really that complicated. It's simply a matter of a country of origin, either for you or for your family. Again, most of us speak Spanish. Most of us come from Latin America. About half the Latino population, adult Latino population, are immigrants. So that's what differentiates us from other groups. But mostly has to do with the country of origin. That's
okay. It still doesn't make any sense to me at all. But as a political matter, it makes a lot of sense because it allows people like you to say, I represent everybody on an entire continent, when clearly that's not true. Welcome back. Here's the second half of our interview with Univision anchor Jorge Ramos, the part where he gives up and admits, I'm right. Just kidding. Watch. Get back to the point that you were making a minute ago, that Americans have no right to be concerned about the dramatic demographic change taking place in their country. Let me just stipulate, I'm for getting along, I'm for colorblindness, I'm for tolerance, 100%. But I also think that if things radically change in your country, it's okay for you to say, what is this? And maybe I don't want to live in a country that looks nothing like the country I grew up in. Is that bigoted? It seems to me in Mexico you'd be allowed to say that.
Well, we have to understand that there's a demographic wave or revolution, if you want to call it, happening right here in the United States. Right now, there are about 60 million Latinos. In about 35 years, there's going to be 100 million Latinos. 1 in 3 is going to be a Latino. So there's a demographic revolution or a Latino revolution going on. Now, on the other hand, if you are implying that there's an invasion to the United States, that is
not true. I'm not saying invasion. I'm merely saying you're name-calling. Wait, you come to this country, you make a ton of money, and then you yell at people who say, well, wait a second, you know, this is having an effect on my kid's school, on my culture, on the economy, and your point is you're not allowed to have that opinion.
Actually, that is not true. It's obviously it's having an impact, but it's having a positive impact.
Yeah, in some ways it is, but not in all ways.
No. And overall, there's an immigration surplus. All immigrants contribute about $2 billion to the economy of the United States. In other words, immigrants contribute and put much more money into the system than what they take out in social services. According to the National Academy of Sciences, in 20 years, it's been $54 billion in input on immigration surplus. So it is a great business to have immigrants in this country.
Those numbers aren't exactly right, but I think some immigrants contribute a lot. Some immigrants contribute a lot.
The National Academy of Sciences, those are the numbers.
It's a little more complicated than that, but I don't want to debate that right now. I just want to make the point that there is a downside as well. There's clearly an upside, and we all recognize, and people like immigrants actually in America, despite your claims. They do. But there's also a downside. 15% of federal inmates, prisoners, are Mexican citizens. So, like, why shouldn't I be allowed to say that's a problem? I don't want those. I don't want criminals here from another country. They're not even citizens.
No, that's precisely the problem, because you, like Donald Trump, are also criminalizing the immigrant population. That is not true.
I'm not criminalizing them. I'm noting a fact of who they are.
It is not true. These are the facts. 97% of undocumented immigrants, 97% are good people. Less than 3% are bad hombres, or they committed a felony, according to the Migration Policy Institute. So
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
The vast majority, Tucker, are good people.
But
they're not criminals.
I'm not arguing that the vast majority are criminals. Now, their presence here illegally is a crime, and I think they should. We should be honest about that. But most are decent people. I agree, and most Americans agree.
Most of them are.
15% of all federal inmates in America are Mexican citizens. That's not a small number. That's many, 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 many thousands. Doesn't mean they're all bad. It means that's a big number.
I don't know what's your source. I'm giving you my source. My source is
the Bureau of
Migration Policy Institute.
How's that?
Well, I don't know if that's correct.
So you don't actually know anything about this. So that's my
what I'm saying is that,
you're making generalizations that are not rooted in fact.
This is the important thing, Tucker. 3%, less than 3% of undocumented immigrants commit felonies. In contrast, about 6% of Americans commit felonies. In other words, the more immigrants that you have, the more immigrants
you
that you have.
made that point at the outset. So let me just ask you one last question. We're almost out of time, and you don't have command of these numbers, so it's pointless. But let me ask you this, a theoretical question. What immigration restrictions would you favor in Mexico? It's already a felony to be there illegally, but what further restrictions in the country of Mexico, the country of your birth, would you favor?
Mexico is a terrible example for the protection of immigrants. Mexico treats Central American immigrants in a terrible way. So I wouldn't put Mexico as an example. I think countries should be judged by the way they treat the most vulnerable, not the most powerful. And Mexico is doing a horrible job when it comes to human rights and when it comes to treating Central Americans. On the other hand, here in the United States, I think we have the responsibility to treat immigrants in a decent, in a humane way. We are responsible partly because of that. They come here, undocumented immigrants, because there are thousands of American companies who hire them, and millions of Americans, including you and me and the audience, who benefit from their work. So I think we have the right and the responsibility to treat them much better than the way they treat them in Mexico.
Let me just ask you really quickly. Will you just acknowledge the truth, and you're obviously a very rich person, and I'm around rich people a lot. Rich people in America disproportionately benefit from low-wage, low-skilled immigration in the form of household help, in the form of cheap labor. Let's be totally honest. The middle of the country doesn't benefit a lot from this. It lowers wages. They don't hire a lot of household help. And there is a lot of crime, whether you're willing to admit it or not. So why are they bigots for...
No, there's not a lot of crime, because...
Look, you don't actually... So let's just pretend that I didn't say that because it's a stupid argument.
Donald Trump is the king of fake news when it comes to undocumented immigrants.
I've heard the talking points. But let me just get back to the economics of it. It doesn't actually help an American citizen born here making $40 grand a year to have a bunch of people willing to work for $25 grand a year move into his town. Will you concede that?
No. There's a minimum impact on... No, you can laugh if you want, but that's not the truth. Because you're laughing, that doesn't mean it's the truth. Check the National Academy of Sciences. There's an immigration surplus. Overall, immigrants contribute much more to the economy than what they take away in education and social services. Those are the facts. Some people might be affected, but overall, which is what we care about, overall, they have a positive impact.
Okay. Jorge Ramos, thanks a lot for joining us.